Go
Hey
ahead.
everybody, welcome to Delectable Perceptions. It's your girl Ty, and I have a wonderful guest, Adam. He is on my page, and we're gonna talk about Jibaritos. Hey Adam.
Hey, what's going on, Miss Tanetta? How you feeling?
I am wonderful, and I want to tell you thank you so much for coming to my podcast today to talk about the delicious dish I've never tried before, but now I will.
Hmm.
Jibarito. I want to know, what does a jibarito look like when you make it, or what did it look like when you ate it as a child?
All right. Well, first, thank you for inviting me to join your platform.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, you have recorded many videos for my platform, which I appreciate.
Yes.
So, anytime, any place, I got your back. Jibarito, it's just a special piece of who I am. I think it is the identity. And I want to structure this first by saying sometimes culturally or ethnically, I can be ambiguous. So
Mm.
I do represent myself as an Afro Latino, meaning I recognize my African roots before my Spaniard roots, but doesn't mean that I do not recognize my Puerto Rican culture in that sense. So why I say that and why that's important to this conversation and the powerful sandwich of the jibarito is that I believe the jibarito is a transition between Puerto Rico and the beautiful city of Chicago.
Mm. It's
Yeah,
because. So what is it? Because I'd have to Google it, and if anybody listening, go and
yeah.
Google a jibarito. I'm gonna put a description below. But this looks so good. It looks like a sandwich, but it's like a sandwich, like on steroids to me. Like, what are the components of it?
Yeah, you're right. It is a sandwich, and why I mentioned also that it represents two sides is because in
Mhm.
Puerto Rico they wouldn't normally make this sandwich. It was
Ah,
a Chicago bred thing that spread out. And some other folks might think differently. It's my knowledge of it, right?
yeah.
And the first time I was put onto it, there's a part of the city in Chicago called Humboldt Park. And the
Hmm.
way you know this part of the city, it has two humongous Puerto Rican flags on one side of one block to the other. The
Yeah.
other thing is there's a high school that resides in that neighborhood, and that high school is called Roberto Clemente High School, named after Roberto Clemente, who was one of the first Puerto Rican baseball players to be in the Major League Baseball,
Mhm.
but also passed away due to a plane crash because he was a humanitarian taking food to
Wow.
a different island or a different country. I'm sorry, sidetracking a little here. But the jibarito, when I was thinking of the jibarito and why wanted to talk to Miss Tanetta talks about it,
Yeah.
is it is plantain based. So if you love plantains, whichever way you say it,
Hmm.
that is your bread. That is the bread to the sandwich. And some people be like, how do you do that? And really, it's just being able to soak the banana, cut it in half, have two sides, soak it, and let it marinate in some garlic water because that's the best way. And also throw some parsley in there too, because parsley's so great for plantains. And then what you want to do is split that sucker in half, fry it, and then you want to squash it. And there are tostones squashers that you can use
Yeah.
that you can find on Amazon. What I use, y'all, is a tortilla maker. That's what I use.
Oh, that's smart to make it more flat.
Exactly. And you don't want to make it too flat where it's like cracker thin because then it's not going to hold its weight. So you have to be a little steady with it. But what I'm saying, when you're splitting it in half, so you're getting half a banana. So when
Hmm.
you squash it, it almost spreads out into a hand form, enough to be a bread, right? Enough to hold different items on top of it. So the plantain plays as the bread of the jibarito. And then what comes next is a marinated steak. It can be a skirt steak, mainly a skirt steak, or
Hmm.
similar to an aranchera steak that Mexican culture makes. And you want to marinate that at least 2 days. At
Oh,
least 2 days.
it's
Come
a
on
3 day
now.
process for this thing.
Yeah, it is. So, if you want it right, and really
Mhm.
that plays as the main part of the meat, right? So imagine you have your plantain as the bread, then you throw your meat on that, and then you can also throw tomato, lettuce, jalapeno, whatever you want on top of that. But I think the trick of it is Puerto Ricans were really big with mixing mayo and ketchup.
So what's that called?
And you know what? For people who don't like mayo, because it ain't everybody's cup of tea, and I know,
I love me.
when you
Hold
mix
on.
it with ketchup, yeah, when you mix it with ketchup, it's a different experience. It's kind of tangy, right? And usually for a jibarito, that's what you're kind of sliding on to kind of provide the moisture besides the
Okay.
meat, right? And then you can top that off with any kind of cheese if you want to. If you're gonna do a cheese, I'm gonna recommend either a pepper jack or an Asiago,
Okay.
right? Something that's going to kind of hold that steak in so that when you're about to bite that beautiful sandwich, it's nothing but a marinated steak, tomato, lettuce, plantain, and then that mayo ketchup kind of mix that allows it all to come together. And when you did ask me a question about like what was it for you as a child eating it, and it always resonated for me like I'm eating Puerto Rico in my hand. This is Puerto Rico in my hand. And I found out later that they didn't make them in Puerto Rico. So I was like, well, it is literally the west side of Chicago in my hand,
Yeah, the
right?
west
Because
side of Puerto Rico, Chicago.
that's right, right? So that is the powerful sandwich of the jibarito, and
My
yeah,
God. I always think about the innovativeness, if that's even a word, of just being in Chicago alone. Like we create things out of necessity. Like you didn't have
yeah,
bread, you didn't create I can't forget the name of it's a Mexican sandwich. I'm gonna be so mad at myself. But it's a
torta,
torta. You didn't make a
okay,
torta. You made a jibarito. Like, why didn't you just get the
yeah,
bread? So, like, just thinking about the necessities that, like, we have plenty of plantains. We're gonna use
yeah.
this fruit to create a sandwich that nobody else is doing, and we're gonna make this something that's only known for the Puerto Ricans in Chicago. Because, listen, I'm not Puerto Rican, and I wish I would have had that sandwich early in life. And I just think about like this, like when I talk about the history of food, is knowing that this is
Yeah,
just shared within a specific group. Because I can travel to, like, I'm in Indianapolis. I don't even know if I talk to a Puerto Rican. Hey, you got a Jibarito? They may look at me like, yeah, like what are you talking about? So,
yep,
and
yep,
and then I know like this is kind of like off topic, but it may be on topic because I think
mm,
about my father growing up in Chicago, and he mentions how my father was born in the 1950s and how separated Chicago's neighborhoods are. You got the Irish, you got the
yep,
Jewtown, Chinese,
yep,
Korea, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans,
hmm,
and it's like a little city within a city, and like their
yeah.
culture is just for that group, and people outside of it may not even be aware of it. And that's like
You're so
amazing.
right.
I don't know if you experience like just going to like
Yeah,
from one part to the other. You're like, what is this?
yeah,
In the same
for
city.
sure. Yeah, for sure. Tonight, I lived on all sides of Chicago, South Side, West Side, North Side. And I think part of it, it's the uniqueness of Chicago, although I know it speaks to, major segregation, right?
Hmm.
But I feel like a lot of those cultures identified within that space and that time. And what I mean by that is like, right, for the cons that we can obviously point out, like the segregation piece, right?
Right.
The pros to it is that as a culture finds their space and they're able to expand in a couple blocks of neighborhood,
Mhm.
little things come up like the big Puerto Rican iron flags. Little
Mm.
things come up like the Puerto Rican parade or the Jamaican parade, right?
Yes.
Like, we even have a house music parade. So it really, like these little things pop up because of these communities. But what I love about it as I came up, and because I lived on all sides of the city, my life was a little different. I never felt like a visitor when I was in the South Side, right? That
Mm.
just wasn't me. But I know many Latinos who probably did,
Wow.
right? Like
Wow.
they felt
It's
like a
like a
visitor.
visitor from the west side to the south side.
Yeah. So, for me, I think what I saw coming up in what you're saying there, culturally kind of being in our boxes. But what the beauty of that is, and I think as generations overcome some of those stigmas and some of those patterns, right?
Hmm.
These newer generations are like now collaborating differently, entering spaces
Yep.
differently, right? They're
Hmm.
they're they're voicing for each other differently. So if
Yep.
they're like, "Hey, we want some catfish nuggets," you know what I'm saying? They go to
Right.
the south side. They go to the south side to get some catfish nuggets, right? They're not trying to mess on the north side for those.
Right. And I like when you mentioned like how we're just discovering each other, even though we've been here the whole
Yeah.
time. I would watch
Yep.
different videos of people from Chicago. Like I went to the West Side for this restaurant, but on the South Side they got this mac and cheese over here, and I'm like, yo, it's
Uh-huh.
the same city. But it's like I like the fact like it's not necessarily integrating, but we're like rediscovering each other because I'm
Yeah.
like when you it's just funny like when you said it, all I knew was tostones. That's all I knew.
Tostones.
Like, and then you said, "Well, I
Yeah.
got another level for you, Jibarito." I'm like, "What is that? Another level to a tostones? Let me go tell my neighbor. She
Yeah.
don't know nothing about
Yeah.
this."
Yeah. And that's culturally what we do, right? In all cultures where you have certain meals and you come from a certain struggle, you have to
Mhm.
learn how to grab one meal and make three or four out those bad boys, right? And plantains is one of those uh material items that you can actually create in different ways, right? I mentioned when you mentioned it to me, I was like, there's layers to that, right? And there's tostones, which is the savory plantains, and then there's plátano maduro, which is the sweet plantains, right? And it's instead of when you want a savory tostone, you're gonna make sure the banana's fully green.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh!
If
Write
you
these
want a
notes down.
sweet, tostone, that it needs to be almost black or yellow, the banana,
Right, right,
right?
where it's
Because
softer.
now that like the plantain is breaking down, it's starting to become
Hmm.
softer, right? And it's absorbing differently, it fries differently. It still fries, but it's not going to fry like a tostone. So in that sense, you learn how to make two out of one there. And then you say, okay, well, tostone can be a bread now. Let's make a sandwich out that bad boy. Now it's
Wow.
three. But then there's another meal where you can make a tostone out of like a casserole, right? And
Tell me about that
imagine,
because I heard about the Puerto
okay,
Rican now. Tell me about that dish.
yeah, and it's a casserole, and just visualizing this, right? How I mentioned how we make the bread.
Right.
So imagine a casserole pattern. We're gonna grab about four plantains, and we're gonna cover that whole bottom,
Oh,
right?
just the
And
plantain
that
just gonna be
means
the layer. Okay.
and they're flat already. They're kind of in the process of tostones, but not the second. So tostones has a process, right?
Yes.
Miss Tanetta, there's a fry and take out and squash and then fry again.
Yeah.
What you would do is do the fry, squash, and instead of throwing it back in, you're going to put it in the platter of the casserole,
Okay.
right?
Okay. I'm listening.
And then you're going to grab some ground beef or turkey ground beef or whatever is your flavor, right? And then what you want to do is season that ground beef. If you're doing it a Puerto Rican style, Puerto Ricans have this thing called sofrito.
I know some
And
sofrito.
yeah, and they sell it in
You get
stores,
me
but I
hot
wouldn't
now.
buy
My
that.
listeners,
I wouldn't
y'all
buy
know if
that.
you
Yeah,
watch this video.
yeah. You can actually make it. And we probably need to do a whole episode on sofrito,
We
Tanetta.
sure do.
But you want to put sofrito in your ground beef. That is what's going to give it that
Oh,
Puerto Rican flavor. That is what's going to give it that besides your adobo and your sazon, the different seasonings that you put into it to make it
okay.
authentically Caribbean.
Gotcha.
I think that is the base, right? So now you have your flat plantains, you have your
Okay.
ground beef, right? And then you could take your choice of either putting some diced tomatoes, not lettuce, but diced tomatoes,
Yeah.
or with that diced tomatoes, you can also put a small layer of sour cream if that's your jam. And then you want to
Mm-hmm.
top it off with another level of cheese, right? Because Puerto
Oh.
Ricans eat a lot of cheese. But if you don't want cheese, all good. What you're going to do is grab another layer of those plantains and you're
Yeah.
going to top that bad boy over again. And you're going to
Yeah.
keep building your house. That's all you're going to keep doing, right? But when you
Gotcha.
get to that top one, you want it to be the ground beef on the top, not the plantain.
Mhm. Okay. And you
That's how I
bake that
do it.
in the oven.
And then you bake it in the oven about 30, 40 minutes. And that is a tostone casserole.
So,
They have a specific name for it. It's losing, I'm like forgetting it in my brain. I can't remember it. I made it for a few people because, like you, I do catering on the side
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
And that is a dish that was ordered by a few folks. And I think it just speaks to the power of like one meal transforming into like five, right?
Oh
And
my
speaks to the
God.
value of culturally when you come from a certain struggle and you know your resources, what do you do with those resources, right? I
Yeah.
see my mom flip the script with canned corned beef, right?
Canned
uh
corn and pieces.
Canned corned
Pastelón.
beef,
I think that's it. It's pastelón.
pastelón, there you go, thank you, that's
Pastelón.
exactly what
Yes.
it is. Yep.
Yep.
So
Wait.
I think part of it, right, is as it transforms into different meals, I think that's the beauty of culturally how we all unite because we all have
Yeah,
similar practices in that. There's just certain meals that kind of transform and double up and triple up. And I think it also speaks to the creativity of our cultures, right? We're not just staying complacent with a meal. We're like, "Oh, shit, how do we make that better?"
exactly. Now you said your mama said did something with some canned corned beef.
Yes, yes.
What did she?
And it,
What
it
she?
it was back in the day, where cans were cheap and that's what we can afford. But also, organization that you and I grew up with, the Settlement House, they used
Yep.
to donate tons of corned beef to families in that neighborhood. And my mom was a contributor of that. And she used to grab that and put corn in it and a few other things. I can't remember the other pieces, but I swear it felt like she grabbed corned beef and put it on steroids kind of deal, right? And
Mix
why I
about
mentioned
stuff.
that, yeah, why I mentioned that, because it has nothing to do what we're with tostones and all that, but what it
Yeah,
has to
yeah,
do with it, what we're talking about is when you have limited resources, it doesn't mean that that meal can't be delicious. You could
yes.
transform it. You could think differently. Don't stay in the same pattern of that meal. If you're sitting here every week, like, oh, I'm cooking this again, change it up, right?
Right,
Like,
right, right.
so,
Okay.
and that my
Okay.
mom did that very well.
I'm over here thinking like I got a lot of questions firing off in my head because the process, and we're gonna go back to Jibarito. Don't go back to it because I don't know the science behind it because I like experimenting in the kitchen and seeing how foods form different textures and what makes it stronger. Like you said, different plantains are sweet,
Yeah,
one is savory. And the fact that somebody figured out a way, they're food scientists to me, they
yeah.
figured out a way to make a plantain strong enough to hold a whole sandwich without breaking down.
That part. That part.
It make me, I tie this into the whole Puerto Rican community. This I'm gonna make it like this because it's a plant that seems so delicate. Like you can seem delicate, but you made it where it can hold layers of items in it, not knowing that it can do that. And it just thinks
Yeah,
about like, and I'm going back to Chicago with it too because there's so many different layers to Chicago. And the groups had
yeah,
to create something. I'm not gonna say out of nothing, but create something that was familiar to them. And
yeah,
then you also told me before this there was a name out of Jibarito, like if you called somebody
yeah.
Gibron, what do you say it
A
was?
jibaro. Jibaro.
Jibaro. And it
Yeah,
means two different things depending on where you at. What is a
yeah,
Jibaron?
yeah. So yeah, in Puerto Rico, a jibaro is someone considered who lives on the island, who might work a farm, sugarcane. They're walking around the streets. You're gonna see them, right? And that is a jibaro. In Chicago, from what I learned coming up in Chicago, a jibaro was one of those old Puerto Rican man walking around the neighborhood. Very similar, right? It's just take them out the island and put them in the concrete jungle, and they doing the same thing. So that jibarito and a jibaro speaks to the spirit of an elder, right?
I didn't know that's what you meant. I
Um,
thought it was a young guy. So
no,
Jibaro.
no, it's an elder. It's an elder. But also resilience, right? Maybe someone who doesn't have all the riches and spoils, but is rich in life. Everybody knows them because they're always around, right? And when you think about the jibarito and connect it to the jibaro, right?
Wow.
The resilience of the sandwich, which you talked about, like how that plantain hold, all that, right? It does speak to the resilience of both those sides, right? And how they come together. And there's a restaurant on Division and North Avenue in Chicago called the Borican. Borican. Dope restaurant. I hope it's still there. Last time I went there was 2021. So hopefully it's still there, but it's one of the first spots in Chicago that
Right.
implemented this sandwich. So how I learned about it was from that restaurant. But I think a big part of just the spirit of the jibaro. When I think
Mm,
of the jibaro, and I'm sure many of my Puerto Rican folks will feel this, I hear the native drums. I think
oh,
of the spirit of our ancestors. I think of Tainos who also made tostones. They were making them way before we were making them, and those were our ancestors, right?
right. The
The
natives.
Arawaks, they were there. They were doing the same things, and then there's so many levels to it because I didn't even mention on Thanksgiving, one of the things that we stuff our turkey with is guess what?
Plantains.
Plantains.
What? Listen, now
Yeah.
I'm coming to your house for Thanksgiving because you gotta do that. A
So, you know,
plantain stuffed
it's the
turkey.
resilience of the banana, right? It really is, Tanetta. It's the resilience of the banana. So imagine scraping that banana down, right?
Wow.
What you're gonna get out of that, it's gonna look kind of like mashed potato-y, kind of
Yeah.
textury, right? You're gonna grab that and then you're gonna cook it up. And you're gonna throw
Okay.
olives in it. For Puerto Ricans, they throw pork, little chunks of pork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's a little pork fat they put in it sometimes too,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
It's going to have seasoning in it. It's going to be marinated. So you also marinate this stuffing, and basically you stuff it in the turkey to cook. You do a little bit of cooking on the stove top, but not the full cooking. The full cooking happens in the turkey.
Wow.
And
And
I'm not
no
saying all
Thanksgiving
Puerto
turkey.
Ricans do that, Tanetta. I'm not saying all Puerto Ricans do that. I know my family does it,
Right. 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 Okay. And
right?
I'm trying to think like I want this the Puerto Rican Chicago Puerto Ricans or if it is the that's so interesting. Like you go
Yeah.
from one land mass to the other, it's still plantains, but they
Yep.
like rice. And I know a lot of Puerto Ricans use olives. I didn't even know. I'm like, yeah, put
Yeah.
olives.
Yeah, they olives like crazy. I can't stand olives. I'm one Puerto Rican who can't stand them. But Millie, if I make Puerto Rican rice and beans and I don't put olives in it, Millie like she's like, "What you doing? Why you not putting olives in this thing?" Like
I would get for
they're
a jar.
supposed
Here's
to
the
be in
jar.
there. Uh-huh. And I think part of it too, as you think of like the plantain, the banana in general, right? As powerful it is in Puerto Rico, it's just as powerful in Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti,
Ah,
right?
right.
It lives in all the Caribbean island. You mentioned the other day when we were just chit-chatting, your friend from Venezuela, right?
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
so all of us culturally tap into them, even Africans, right? All of
absolutely.
us tap into them. And the beauty of it, and this is what brings me back when I think of the jibaro and the jibarito. That's what brings me back to our ancestors, because we
Mm,
all at some point came from Africa. So for
right.
me, I'm just doing naturally what I would naturally do if I was in Africa,
Look.
which is eat a gang of plantains, right?
Yeah.
Like, but we flipping the script with it because evolution is a beautiful thing. And when you start it, so I visualize Tainos and Arawaks and African tribes sitting here
Mm,
squashing plantains, doing different things with them that we might not know, right? And
right.
then years pass by, generations go by, and it just keeps evolving. The
Right.
practices stay the same, but they get perfected, right? New seasonings enter in because I'm one Puerto Rican. I just love parsley, but a lot of Puerto Ricans
You
won't
left
put
this
parsley on their
cilantro.
plantains, right? So in
Mm.
saying that, I think a big beautiful part of the banana is that it's a universal resource for many countries in the Caribbean island who really survived off of that sugarcane and a few other elements that just live in a very thriving way out there in the islands.
Mm. Oh, you making me want to go to Puerto Rico, go to Puerto Rican. You said Puerto Rican. I wrote it down. Division in North.
Boriken, Boriken. Yep,
Puerto
Boriken.
Rican. I want. Did I stand
Yep.
for Black and Puerto Rican? What does that even say? That's what that
Boricua is,
means.
is is just a way of saying Puerto Rican. That's another way of saying Puerto Rican.
Puerto
Yeah.
Rican.
And Big Pun used to have that song, Boricua, Morena,
Oh
right? That
yeah.
was saying black, brown, black, right? It was basically black and Puerto Rican. But yeah.
Oh my.
Hmm.
Listen, y'all. Everybody's listening. If you in Chicago, if you, I
Hmm.
don't know, I don't know, Boricua is still there. I'm gonna look it up, and if
Look
it's
it
there, I'm
up.
gonna put it in the comments. I'm gonna put it out there. Y'all tell me how it tastes because I'm gonna go home. I'm going to my kitchen. I got some plantains right now. I'm gonna go in. He said soaking in hot water. Right, the process soaking the plantain in hot water. I wash
Yes,
it
what you
and
want to
I
do is you want to soak them in cool water, so like room temperature
oh not
water.
hot water. Okay.
Yep. And you want to put some garlic powder or not salt, garlic powder or
Yep.
granulated salt in
Yeah.
the water. I put parsley, so I put parsley flakes in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then yeah, let it marinate for 30 minutes. Let those plantains bathe in that garlic because what you
Okay.
want, what's a complementary, I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so my words keep stumbling. What's a
Okay.
complementary piece to plantains is garlic. Garlic is so They're 1-1, right? And it don't take much. So 30 minutes of soaking it. Why I do that is that on the other end, when they're complete, I'm not sitting here dousing them with garlic salt.
Ah, so
Because
you
they're when you taste them, you're tasting the garlic.
Let me give me a press. So soak them in garlic, then y'all peel them.
Yep.
And
Well, no, I peel them, right? So some people, what they do, like, because sometimes those bananas are tough, right?
right.
So they'll boil that. They'll just boil the
Well,
full banana with the skin on. I don't do that. I use my Puerto Rican fingers and I split that banana in the middle and I do my technique of getting the banana off the shell and I get the full banana out, cut that sucker in 1.5 pieces, depending
yeah.
on what you're doing. If you're doing a jibarito, cut that banana in half. You'll make 2 sandwiches out of that one banana,
Wow.
right? And
Okay.
then once you do that, once you soak them and they soak for 30 minutes, you want to take them out, sit them on like a wooden board or something, whatever,
Yeah.
and you want to dry them off because you don't want them to go into the fryer wet, right? So dry them off. I usually you could tap them off with a paper towel, whichever way you
Yeah.
want to do it, and then fry them. And you'll know that they're completed because they'll rise to the top,
Okay.
right? Once you start seeing those bad boys rise to the top, flip them
Take it out.
over and let
Okay.
them and give them a minute, right? Because they're already done. Pretty much, you just got to flip the other side, and you'll know when you grab them with the tongs, you're gonna feel the stiffness, like they almost have a coating, and you can
Right.
tap the side of the cast iron, and it'll make a little noise that it's stiff, and you know that is spot on. And you want to put it back somewhere. You want to give it a little salt, not too much, because it's already kind of got that seasoning. Or you can make a mojito sauce, which is like a garlic infused kind of garlic infused smoked paprika and cayenne. And it's just a
Uh-huh.
little kind of dipper to dip, right? And then you just fry it, take it back out, squash it. And now when you got it in your form, usually they're like round or kind of
Yeah.
like slender. You got it in your form, you want to put it in there for a second fry.
Oh, come on, it's gonna fall apart. Okay, do it again.
Yep, because you know it got its first fry, so you could squash it, and that it could
Yeah.
take the squashing. Now that it takes the squash in, you're like, okay, now I'm gonna put it back in there so it can
Okay.
fry in its real form.
Okay, and then pat it dry. I mean, like
And then
take
once
it
it,
out.
yeah, what? I'm sorry, go ahead, Tanet. I'm bad. My bad.
Once it's
Go ahead.
done, I can build my sandwich inside.
Yes. Yep.
Can I put avocado in there?
You can put avocado in there as well. Yeah,
Okay,
for
that's
sure.
something. I love me some avocado. I don't eat
For
steak, but
sure.
I may put some avocado, some other stuff in there.
Yeah.
Tomato,
Yeah.
it's gonna be tomato jabalito. Okay. Okay, listen, we about to conclude this because you're making me hungry, and I'm
Uh-huh.
fasting right now, which is wonderful. I'm preparing myself because I'm gonna have some jabaritos for dinner. You don't even know what you just did. Um, but for everybody out there, listen up. You all have just heard Adam talk about all this Puerto Rican goodness. I'm putting some
Mhm.
details in the comments for you all to click. I'm gonna put a video because I saw some videos on YouTube how to make your own jabarito. Let us know
Yeah.
how it tastes, okay? So thank you, Adam, for coming to Delectable Perceptions.